For those of you who missed it last week, the Mets capped off a historic overhaul at this year's trade deadline. Now, while this was happening, I hopped on a 5+ hour live stream with fellow Mets podcasters John Saponaro, Matt Ibanez from Till Mets Do Us Part, and Anthony Rivera from Subway to Shea to live react to the last hours of the trade deadline. The conclusion was clear. The underperforming Mets have waved the white flag on 2023 and have now shifted their focus to 2024, 2025, and beyond. So now it is time to review, go in depth on this entire saga, and give my brutal, honest opinion. So here we go, reviewing and grading the Mets 2023 trade deadline. Now, before we start this video, I want to make a PSA to Mets fans. I think it's perfectly reasonable to be upset with how this season went on this year. But going into 2023, there were many warning signs of something like this happening. Over the offseason, the Mets made the decision to bring back a mass majority of the same team last year that won 101 games but lost in the NL wildcard. The problem with doing that is that a majority of this team was in their mid to late 30s. The lack of youth and top-heavy reliance on aging veterans went south real quick this season. To put it simple, the Mets proceeded to make an old team older while constructing a near $400 million payroll. Well, it ended up backfiring, and they did what they needed to do. I personally believe that it's no secret that this team and this organization got exactly what they deserve, relying on what they relied on, and they played like garbage, and so the nukes come out. If only somebody in this world saw that from a mile away. But nonetheless, what's done is done. There's no looking back now, so let's review it. Let's begin with the first major trade that was made a few weeks before the deadline, that being the Mets trading Eduardo Escobar to the Angels and acquiring two minor league prospects, Coleman Crowe and Landon Marchessault. In condition to that, the Mets would also cover Escobar's remaining 2023 salary, giving the Angels pure team control for 2024. As for the return, first there is Coleman Crowe, a 22-year-old right-handed pitcher, 6 foot, 175 pounds, former 28th round pick by the Angels back in 2019. Crowe has been scouted with a ceiling of a back-end MLB starter who could be called up later next year at the earliest. He throws from a low arm slot. He's not a flashy arm, but he relies on pitchability with a 4-pitch mix, a low 90s fastball that tops at about 94 with extra sink, a plus low 80s slider with high spin rates, a low vertical dropping curveball, and the occasional changeup. He has above average command plus control, but his main weakness has been the lack of an out pitch, but most recently he has been able to get strikeouts so far this season. Before, it was cut short due to an elbow concern, which has not come with a recent update. It all depends on the timetable, but he could get his chance to make an impression on the Mets when fully healthy. As for Landon Marchessault, he is a 23-year-old right-handed pitcher, 6 foot, 199 pounds, former 3rd round pick by the Angels back in 2021. He's a soft tosser with great overall fastball and breaking ball shape, low 90s four-seam with plus running action. He has two distinct breaking balls in terms of shape with a slider and a curveball, and a heavy fading changeup in the low 80s. He manages contact well, but he does have trouble getting whiffs, with above average control and command, but scouts have said with a great feel for pitch execution, he does have a ceiling of a future back-end starter in an MLB rotation. Moving on from a very clear short-term piece in Eduardo Escobar, who was not having a good season, in return getting two pitchers who could possibly be rotation depth in the near future. There's nothing that completely jumps off the page from these two arms. I think this was good value for what you gave up. It makes the upper levels of the minor leagues younger and gives you some starter options for the future. Overall, a solid return for Eduardo Escobar. And that moves us to a few days before the trade deadline, when the Mets traded relief pitcher David Robertson to the Marlins and acquired prospects Marco Vargas and Ronald Hernandez. As for Vargas, he's an 18-year-old infielder, 6 foot, 170 pounds, an international signing last year by the Marlins out of Mexico. Vargas's plus hit tool has scouted him as an advanced hitter for his age with good pitch recognition and a quick left-handed swing that helps him pull line drives. The power is a work in progress, but his strong lower half gives him a solid 15 to 20 home run upside by possibly adding more muscle throughout his development. Overall, as a player, Vargas has average speed as a plus base runner. He displays average range and arm strength, which most likely suits him at second base the best. With an ETA of 2027, it's going to take a while for Vargas to adjust in overall versatility, but there is definitely a ceiling of a solid major league player, but he is pretty young to make any hard conclusions. The other piece in this trade being Ronald Hernandez, a 19-year-old catcher, 5'11", 155 pounds, an international signing by the Marlins in 2021 out of Venezuela. Hernandez has a very fluent swing from both sides of the plate as a switch hitter, and he has been scouted as a solid bat-to-ball hitter with plus pitch selection. As he continues to add more arm strength for his doings behind the plate, Hernandez could hit a power ceiling of about 10 to 15 to maybe even 20 home runs a year if he learns how to lift the ball consistently. But his defense is his main raw skill with a plus arm and great overall agility for blocking balls in the dirt. His receiving/framing has continued to impress scouts, describing him as an advanced game caller for his age. With an ETA of 2026, his defensive prowess could jumpstart him to the upper levels of the minor leagues in the future. I overall wasn't completely happy about this trade. I think the Mets should have waited it out, especially when you look at the reliever market on the trade deadline. After seeing the returns of relievers like Pierce Johnson and Andrew Chafin got on the market, I personally believe that this return was a little bit underwhelming. You had an almost guarantee that David Robertson was going to hit the open market, and his market was going to be pretty deep. You had to get something back for him, but Vargas and Hernandez just seem like two lottery tickets that most likely will not stick. It's definitely too early to make that take, but I do believe that David Robertson was probably one of their top trade chips, and most relievers went for a decent return this year, so it's definitely overwhelming to say the least. The Mets kept on moving pieces as they traded outfielder Mark Canha to the Brewers and acquired pitching prospect Justin Jarvis. Jarvis is 23 years old, 6'2", 183 pounds, a former fifth-round pick by the Brewers back in 2018. As a high slot throwing pitcher, Jarvis was really able to ramp up his velocity a tick or two, now consistently sitting at 93 to 94 miles an hour and topping 94 with a heavy rising action four seam. His secondary stuff includes a low 80s split change with plus fade, a low 80s slider with plus shape, and a mid-70s late rotational curveball. Jarvis isn't a flashy arm, but his execution is a plus at best. But at his worst, his command does take a massive dip, as he mainly tends to relieve a lot of breaking balls over the plate. Overall, he does have quality control, and that has scouted him to have the ceiling of a solid back-end starter in the majors. He does have a heavy projected season to start off in AAA for 2024, but Jarvis could be an option real soon, depending on his ability to string along some more consistency. Now, out of all the prospects the Mets acquired, I would definitely put Jarvis in my top 3 of this trade deadline. One of the main reasons is that I've seen the Mets rotation recently not be able to give us length, and Jarvis has continued throughout his minor league career to consistently give 6 to 7 plus innings. Now, overall, I do like this guy's fastball, and I do think it pairs up very well with his slider, but I do hope he adds maybe a cutter into there because of the heavy rising action that he does have. If you sit regularly in the mid-90s, you're going to need multiple weapons. And I do think that there is plenty of upside for Jarvis as a possible back-end piece. The Mets moved yet another piece from their outfield by moving Tommy Pham to the Diamondbacks in exchange for prospect Jeremy Rodriguez. Rodriguez is a 16-year-old infielder, preferably a shortstop, 6 foot, 170 pounds, an international signing by the Diamondbacks this year out of the Dominican Republic. Rodriguez has been scouted to have a very compact left that helps him cover the strike zone with balance, with advanced plate discipline. He still has a lot of room to add muscle, with his power upside currently going in the right direction. Now, most international scouts do believe that Rodriguez has all the tools needed to be a shortstop. A plus arm, quick hands, and above average range. He's also a plus base runner with great speed, and his overall instincts as a player has labeled him a big stolen base threat going forward. Rodriguez came in with some high expectation as the highest paid international prospect by the Diamondbacks pool this season. He's extremely young with a lot of room to grow, but his ceiling is intriguing with an ETA of 2028 and his raw skill set. This is one of your wait and see see returns. But it seems like the Mets are really intrigued by how much of a good athlete he is. Now, like the Robertson trade, I believe that the Mets possibly could have gotten a little bit more back for Tommy Pham, but on the other hand, he is 35 years old. He is most likely going to be a rental for the Diamondbacks, and a lottery ticket was probably one of the best returns that they had. But if the Mets could have sweetened the deal and possibly paid the remainder of Tommy Pham's contract so the Diamondbacks got him for free, I would be expecting a little bit more for how good Tommy Pham has been for the Mets all season. That brings us to a surprise trade, as the Mets were able to move Dominic Leone to the Angels in exchange for prospect Jeremiah Jackson. I did not know that Dominic Leone was on the trade block, and I was surprised that they got a return back for him. Jackson is a 23-year-old utility player, 6 foot, 165 pounds, a former second-round pick by the Angels back in 2018. He's an average-sized athlete who produces strong exit velocities with plus raw power and bat speed, and he's also a big pull side hitter. His contact rates can be hit and miss at times, but he favors well against high velocity overall. Jackson was a shortstop when he was first drafted, but he really expanded his versatility since then, getting good time at second base, learning third base, and covering plus ground in the quarter outfield positions. With a 2024 ETA, scouts are still waiting for his upside power to translate consistently in the upper levels. To put it simple, the raw power is there, but the game power has not shown up consistently yet. Now, Jackson was also originally drafted by current Mets GM Billy Epler and was one of his 2 overslot signings in that 2018 class. Get a shot in the majors later next year if all goes well. In terms of just pure value, I think this was a massive steal for Dominic Leone, a pitcher near his mid-30s who the Mets have pretty much overworked a lot this season due to the lack of length coming out of the starting rotation. I actually personally agree as to why Billy Epler likes this guy. He has a lot of versatility, he brings in a lot of quality of contact, and he could provide a lot of value for a major league team if he hits that expected ceiling. Now that brings us to the 2 big fish, as the Mets traded Max Scherzer to the Rangers and acquired prospect Luis Angel Acuna. Pushing the entire Max Scherzer situation aside, the Mets are covering $35 million in his remaining money, with Max Scherzer agreeing to opt into his 2024 player option worth over $43 million. But as for the return, Luis Angel Acuna is a 21-year-old middle infielder, 5'8", 181 pounds, a former international signing by the Rangers back in 2018 out of Venezuela. For those of you who recognize that last name, he is actually the little brother of Braves superstar Ronald Acuna Jr. He doesn't have his star ceiling, but he overall is a plus toolsy player. Acuna has an explosive right-handed swing just like his brother, but does have some inconsistent plate discipline and selection against non-high velocity pitches. If Acuna could find a consistent balance to his swing, he's been scouted as a potential 20 home run bat in the majors with better quality of contact. He's got plus speed on the bases, solid range and a plus arm at both second base and shortstop, and an overall great athlete for his strong frame. His 2024 ETA is pretty much just depending on his performance for the rest of the year and into next season, but it will be intriguing to see how he can contribute at the major league level with his explosive play on both sides of the field. Now, considering the contract of Max Scherzer, I am not really shocked that the Mets only got Acuna in return and not multiple pieces. There was one other piece that I would have loved the Mets to get in Sebastian Walcott, who has a ridiculous power upside, but this Mets team, as we all know, does need to get younger, and you can't go wrong with good all-around athletes. I am interested to see if Acuna can hit for a little bit more power, because he does have the particular bat speed that if he does remain consistent with his upper and lower half, he could definitely rack up a lot of extra base hits. I'm definitely not expecting him to match up to what his brother has been able to do in the major league level, but overall I think he could be a solid major league player. If he does succeed at the major league level, I believe that he could definitely help you win ball games in a lot of different ways. The final big domino to fall was Justin Verlander, as they sent him back to his former team, the Houston Astros, and acquired prospects Drew Gilbert and Ryan Clifford. Out of all the deadline deals, I personally think this was the best trade of them all. The first piece in the return was their number 1 prospect in Drew Gilbert, a 22-year-old outfielder, 5'9", 195 pounds, a former first-round pick by the Astros last year. Gilbert has been described as an all-around pest on the field. His overly aggressive instincts have labeled him as an instant spark plug for any team he plays plays on. His quick hands have given him the ability to register high exit velocities with a very leveled left-handed swing. Now, due to his small frame, he's not a plus physically, but does have the bat speed to possibly be a 20 home run bat. Now, he did have some early launch angle issues, which has improved, and with his pull side numbers as high as they are, we could see his in-game power take a leap in the next few years. He has above average speed, can cover a lot of ground in all three outfield positions with a plus arm as a former collegiate pitcher. From what teammates have said about him, he's a fiery competitor who brings a lot of emotion, but he could overdo it a bit. Now, this is the Brandon Nimmo play style that I think is a great comparison, but then I see this personality and it reminds me of Lenny Dykstra and it scares the living crap out of me. But either way, this team needs that fire and it could see it very soon with a 2025 ETA. I don't think he has a star potential, but I do think he could be a big contributor at the major league level. Definitely gives you an outfield option down the line. As for the other piece in this trade, which was my favorite acquisition of the entire deadline, Ryan Clifford, a 20-year-old outfielder, 6'3", 200 pounds, a former 11th round pick by the Astros last year. This is my type of hitter right here. Good pitch selection, sacrifices contact for power, and plus bat speed with a very loud swing. If he does fully pan out offensively, his raw power ceiling could instantly make him a 30 home run bat in the future. Now, Clifford can come with frequent strikeouts, but they have gone down in the last year as he's continued to improve against the breaking ball and he's walking a lot more. He still has some room to build more muscle, which could possibly slow him down a bit on defense, which isn't particularly great because he really is not a great outfield defender. I personally see him as a first baseman given the current frame, but he does have a plus arm in the corners, which adds to the versatility more than against it. We won't see Clifford in the majors for a while, but I'm extremely excited to see what this kid can do in the next few years. This is one of those power anchor upside bats that this franchise has desperately needed for a long time. I am praying that this guy can be that, but only time will tell. Now, as for some other trades that the Mets made at the deadline, they did acquire some relievers with some upside who are young and controllable, such as Trevor Gott, Phil Bickford, and Adam Korolek. Now, I personally just wanted to keep this strictly on the prospect aspect of it, and also I don't really see any of these three arms lasting that long because of how they have performed at the major league level so far for the Mets. It's not really looking pretty. Given the tough circumstances this year, I think the Mets did have a successful deadline. They did what they needed to do. They kept the main core of the team intact. They moved a lot of aging veterans who are not going to be here long term to bring down the luxury tax threshold, to bring them back up 10 slots in the draft, to build the farm system even more in June. And with the Mets putting 2023 in the waste bin, this season could end with the Mets having a top 10 pick in the draft. This could come with a lot of pain as to watching this team for the next 2 months, but we just have to count down the days and make the best of it. The Mets want to get younger, and they're looking towards the future.